I've always been the responsible one. That's what my parents taught me to be, what everyone expected of me, and what I demanded of myself. By 35, I was the financial director at a Fortune 500 company, owned 2 properties, and had a retirement plan that would make most financial advisors weep with joy. I had done everything right, checked all the boxes, and built the secure life I was supposed to want. And I was utterly alone. Not physically alone. I had colleagues who respected me, a few friends I met for brunch every other Sunday, and my family. But emotionally, I had built walls so high around myself that sometimes I couldn't remember what it felt like to truly connect with anyone. My sister Lily was different. 5 years younger than me, she blazed through life like a comet, brilliant, unpredictable, and leaving chaos in her wake. Where I calculated risks, she took leaps of faith. Where I saved, she spent. Where I planned, she improvised. And people adored her for it. Emma? Earth to Emma? Lily's voice cut through my thoughts as we sat at my kitchen island. She waved a wedding magazine in my face, her engagement ring catching the light. You haven't heard a single word I've said, have you? I blinked and focused on her. Sorry, just thinking about work. The Sullivan merger is, God, you're so boring sometimes. She rolled her eyes but smiled to soften the blow. I was asking what you think about these centerpieces. She pointed to an elaborate arrangement of white roses and crystals that probably cost more than my first car. They're nice, I offered, knowing it wasn't the enthusiastic response she wanted. Lily huffed. Nice? That's all you can say? This is my wedding, Emma, the most important day of my life. I bit back a comment about how her wedding to Jason was actually her second most important day after her disastrous first marriage to a drummer she'd known for 6 weeks. That had ended after 8 months and $17,000 of debt that, surprise, I had helped pay off. They're beautiful, I amended. Very elegant. She beamed, satisfied. I knew you'd see it once you really looked. Jason and I want everything to be perfect. I nodded, taking a sip of my coffee. Jason was Lily's fiance of 11 months. He worked in business development, which, as far as I could tell, meant taking potential clients to expensive lunches and posting motivational quotes on LinkedIn. He drove a leased BMW he couldn't afford and had the kind of confidence that comes from never having faced real consequences. Speaking of perfect, Lily continued, her voice taking on that honeyed tone she used when she wanted something, Jason and I have been talking about our future. That's good. Planning ahead is important, I said, immediately suspicious. Well, we're thinking about where we want to live after the wedding. Jason's apartment is way too small, and mine isn't much better. She trailed off, looking at me expectantly. I waited, already feeling a knot forming in my stomach, and we were thinking. Well, you have 2 properties, Em. The downtown condo where you live and that suburban apartment you bought as an investment. The one we're staying in now, the knot tightened. Yes? Well, since you're not using the apartment yourself, and we're already living there. She reached across the counter and grabbed my hand. It would make the most amazing wedding present. I stared at her, certain I had misheard. You want me to give you my apartment? As a wedding gift? Not give, exactly. More like transfer. Ownership. She smiled brightly. You're already letting us live there, rent-free. This would just make it official, and it would be such a perfect start for us, Em. You know how much I love that place. The apartment in question was a spacious 2-bedroom in a desirable suburb that I had purchased 3 years ago as an investment. When Lily and Jason had needed a place to stay temporarily after Lily lost her job at the boutique, and Jason was between opportunities, I had offered to let them stay there without rent until they got back on their feet. That was 14 months ago. Lily, that apartment is worth over $500,000, I said slowly. And I'm already contributing $25,000 to your wedding. Her expression clouded. So, you can afford it. You make more in a year. than Jason and I will make in 5. You're single with no kids, and you already have your fancy downtown condo. What do you need a second property for, except to make more money you don't need? The casual cruelty of her assessment stung more than I wanted to admit, as if my life choices, focusing on my career, not having found the right partner yet, not having children, somehow made me less deserving of what I had worked for. That's not the point, I said, keeping my voice even. I bought that apartment as an investment for my future. I've already been generous letting you both live there rent-free for over a year. Lily's lower lip jutted out, the same expression she'd used to get her way since she was 4 years old. I thought you'd be happy to help us start our lives together. Mom and Dad think it's a great idea. Of course they did. My parents had always embraced Lily's impulsiveness as free-spirited while viewing my caution as being uptight. They had bailed her out of every mess, celebrated her smallest achievements, and somehow still saw her as the perpetual underdog who needed extra support. Meanwhile, my successes were expected, my struggles private. You already discussed this with Mom and Dad before talking to me? I asked, the knot in my stomach spreading to my chest. Well, yeah. We were at Sunday dinner last week. You know, the one you missed because of your important meeting. She made air quotes around the words. Anyway, they thought it was a wonderful gesture. Mom even cried a little. I set my coffee cup down, carefully, afraid I might break it otherwise. I'm sorry, Lily, but the answer is no. I'm happy to let you stay there at reduced rent after the wedding, but I'm not giving you the apartment. Her face fell, then hardened. Wow, wow. I guess I shouldn't be surprised. You've always been selfish when it really matters. Selfish? I repeated, incredulous. How is not giving away a $500,000 property selfish? Because you don't need it, she exclaimed, throwing her hands up. You're just hoarding wealth while your own sister struggles. Do you know how hard it is for our generation to buy property? Of course you don't, because you've always had everything handed to you. The irony of this statement was so profound, I almost laughed. Everything I had worked for. Every penny I'd saved, every promotion I'd earned, every late night and missed weekend. Meanwhile, Lily had bounced from job to job, relationship to relationship, always with our parents' emotional and financial safety net beneath her. I think you should go, I said quietly, not trusting myself to say more. Fine, she snapped, gathering her wedding magazines. But this conversation isn't over. We're having dinner at Mom and Dad's tonight, and we're all going to discuss this as a family. 7 o'clock. Be there. She stalked out, leaving me sitting in my immaculate kitchen, surrounded by all the trappings of success that suddenly felt hollow. I almost didn't go to dinner. Every instinct told me it was a trap, that I would be walking into an ambush. But some mixture of obligation, hope, and masochism propelled me to my parents' suburban home that evening. The moment I walked through the door, I knew I had made a mistake. The tension was palpable, like walking into a thundercloud. My father was pouring drinks in the living room, more generous than usual. My mother was arranging appetizers with sharp, jerky movements. Lily sat on the couch, Jason's arm draped possessively around her shoulders, both of them watching me with expectant eyes. There she is, my father said, with forced joviality. The career woman deigns to join us commoners for dinner. I ignored the jab, having long ago learned that engaging only made things worse. Hi, Dad, Mom, Jason. I nodded at each of them, then took the seat furthest from Lily and Jason. Drink? Dad offered, already pouring me a scotch I didn't ask for. Just water, please. I'm driving. He rolled his eyes. Always so responsible. Live a little, Emma. Mom emerged from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a dish towel. Dinner's almost ready. I made pot roast. Emma's favorite, Lily said with a saccharine smile. How thoughtful of you, Mom. The implication was clear. Look how well your mother knows you. Look what she does for you. You owe us. Dinner began with artificial pleasantries. How was work? Fine. The weather? Unseasonably warm. The upcoming election? Better not discuss. We danced around the elephant in the room until the plates were cleared, and then Dad cleared his throat. So, Lily tells us you two had a discussion about the apartment today, and there it was. I set down my water glass. We did. And? Mom prompted, and I said no, I'm not giving away my property as a wedding gift. The table fell silent for a beat, and then everyone spoke at once. After everything we've done for you, Dad started. I just don't understand why you're being so difficult, Mom chimed in. It's not like you need two places, Lily added. If I may, Jason interrupted, raising his hand like he was in a business meeting. Emma, I think you're not seeing the bigger picture here. Lily and I are trying to build a life together, a family. Your sister wants to be a mother someday. Don't you want your future nieces and nephews to have a stable home? The emotional manipulation was so transparent, I almost admired the audacity. My apartment has nothing to do with your future children, Jason. But it has everything to do with family, my mother said, her voice quavering with rehearsed emotion. Family supports each other, Emma. Your father and I have always taught you girls to share. I am sharing, I pointed out. They've been living there rent-free for over a year. I've never asked for a dime in utilities. I'm contributing $25,000 to their wedding. How is that not supportive? It's the principle, Dad said, his face reddening. Your sister needs help establishing herself. You're already established. It's about equity. I felt like I had stepped into some parallel universe where my hard work was a character flaw and Lily's irresponsibility was virtuous. I'm established because I've worked incredibly hard for 15 years to get where I am. I've made sacrifices. I've taken risks. I've put in 80-hour weeks. And now you're just a lonely workaholic with two properties and no one to share them with, Lily said, delivering the blow she knew would hurt most. The table fell silent. My mother looked down at her plate. My father took a long drink. Jason at least had the decency to look uncomfortable. Lily, my mother finally murmured, that was uncalled for. But she didn't disagree. None of them did. I stood up slowly, my chair scraping against the hardwood floor. Thank you for dinner. I should be going. Oh, don't be so sensitive, Lily said with an exaggerated eye roll. We're just being honest. That's what family does. No, Lily. What family should do is respect each other's boundaries and choices. What family should do is celebrate each other's successes instead of punishing them. What family should do is love each other unconditionally, not just when it's convenient or profitable. Now you're just being dramatic, my father scoffed. Nobody's punishing you. We're asking you to be generous to your sister who hasn't had all your advantages. What advantages? I asked, genuinely curious. We grew up in the same house, went to the same schools, had the same opportunities. You were always smarter, my mother said, as if intelligence was something I had stolen from Lily rather than a trait I had cultivated through study and discipline. And colder, Lily added. I feel things more deeply than you. It makes life harder. I looked at my sister, really looked at her, and saw the person my parents had created through years of lower expectations and higher rewards. The person who genuinely believed that her emotional nature entitled her to more grace, more forgiveness, more everything. I'm not giving you the apartment, I said quietly. And I think it's best if you start looking for a new place to live after the wedding. The explosion was immediate and spectacular. Lily burst into tears. Mom gasped. Dad slammed his hand on the table. You would put your own sister out on the street? Over money? He demanded. I'm not putting anyone on the street. I'm giving them 3 months to find a place they can afford on their own incomes, like every other adult couple starting their lives together. This is exactly why you're alone, Lily spat through her tears. You're incapable of love or generosity. You think everything can be calculated and budgeted? No wonder no man wants to stay with you. The words hit their mark with surgical precision. My last serious relationship had ended 2 years earlier when Paul had accepted a job in Singapore. without even discussing it with me. "I knew you wouldn't come," he had said. "Your life is here. Your precious career is here." As if loving my work made me incapable of loving a person. "I think we're done here," I said, gathering my purse. "If you walk out that door," my father warned, "you're making a choice about what kind of daughter and sister you want to be." I paused at the threshold of the dining room. "No, Dad. I made that choice a long time ago when I decided to be the kind of person who respects herself enough not to be manipulated and guilt-tripped by the people who are supposed to love her most." And then I left, the sound of Lily's sobs and my mother's soothing murmurs following me out the door. I didn't cry until I was safely inside my downtown condo, door locked, shoes kicked off, curled up on my oversized couch with a glass of wine I definitely needed now. Then the tears came, hot, angry tears that blurred my vision and made my chest ache. What hurt most wasn't Lily's entitlement or my parents' favoritism. Those were old wounds, scars I had learned to live with. What cut deepest was the realization that my family saw my success as nothing more than a resource to be tapped, a well they could draw from whenever Lily's needs demanded it. And worse, they saw me as fundamentally broken, cold, unfeeling, incapable of real connection, simply because I had chosen a path that prioritized stability and self-sufficiency. Was I really the heartless, calculating machine they thought I was? Had I sacrificed some essential part of myself in the pursuit of security? The questions circled my mind like vultures as the night deepened around me. My phone buzzed with a text from my mother. "I hope you'll reconsider. Family is all we have in this world." I didn't respond. Instead, I opened my laptop and pulled up the rental agreement for the suburban apartment, the one I had never asked Lily and Jason to sign because they were family and I had trusted them. I had been a fool. By morning, I had made a decision. I composed an email to Lily and Jason, CCing my parents. After careful consideration, I've decided that the current arrangement regarding the apartment isn't working for any of us. As I mentioned last night, I'll be requiring you to vacate the property within 3 months of your wedding. In the meantime, I'll need you to sign a formal month-to-month lease agreement and begin paying market rate rent effective immediately. I've attached the paperwork for your review. Additionally, I've decided to withdraw my financial contribution to the wedding, as it seems my support is being taken for granted rather than appreciated. I hope this gives you both the opportunity to start your married life together independently as you build the future you want on your own terms. Emma. I hesitated before hitting send, knowing this would ignite a firestorm. But something had shifted in me. For years, I had absorbed the subtle and not-so-subtle messages that my success obligated me to compensate for Lily's struggles, that my boundaries were less important than her needs, that my lone status made my resources community property in a way that a married person's wouldn't be. No more. I clicked to send, then shut my laptop and went to make coffee. By the time I returned, my phone was already lighting up with calls and texts. I silenced it and set it aside. For the first time in years, maybe decades, I would put myself first, and it felt both terrifying and exhilarating. The next 3 weeks were a war of attrition. My parents called daily, leaving increasingly desperate voicemails that ranged from guilt-tripping, "How could you do this to your sister?" to bargaining, "What if they pay a reduced rent?" to outright threats, "You're forcing us to choose?" "Sides, Emma, and you won't like the outcome." Lily alternated between tearful pleas and vicious attacks, sometimes in the same message. Jason sent a spreadsheet showing how they couldn't possibly afford market rent with their current incomes and wedding expenses. A spreadsheet that conveniently omitted his golf club membership and their frequent weekend getaways. I held firm. The lease agreement remained unsigned on their kitchen counter. The rental payments remained unmade. The deadline for their move-out date after the wedding remained unchanged. Then came the escalation. My parents reached out to our extended family, aunts, uncles, cousins, painting me as the villain who was sabotaging her sister's wedding and future out of spite and greed. Soon, I was receiving concerned calls from relatives I hadn't spoken to in years, all wanting to understand both sides while clearly having already decided which side they were on. My Aunt Patricia, my mother's older sister and the family matriarch, was particularly pointed. "Emma, darling, I've always admired your drive, but there comes a time when a woman needs to recognize what truly matters in life. Your sister is building a family. What are you building? A portfolio?" I wanted to scream that yes, I was building a portfolio and a career and a life that didn't depend on extracting resources from others. Instead, I thanked her for her concern and ended the call. The wedding was now 2 weeks away, and the apartment situation remained at an impasse. Lily and Jason continued to live there without paying rent, seemingly betting that I wouldn't actually follow through on evicting them. My parents had stopped speaking to me entirely, communicating only through plaintive emails from my mother that invariably ended with variations of, "I just don't understand what happened to my sweet little girl." What happened was that their sweet little girl had finally grown a spine. Work became my refuge, as it always had been. I threw myself into the Sullivan merger, spending long hours at the office where nobody questioned my worth or tried to make me feel guilty for my choices. My team respected me. My bosses valued me. In the clean, logical world of corporate finance, effort correlated with reward in a way it never had in my family dynamics. It was during a late-night session reviewing acquisition documents that I received the text that changed everything. It was from my cousin Morgan, Aunt Patricia's daughter, who had always been closer to Lily than to me, but who had a stronger moral compass than most of our family. "You should see what Lily posted on IG about you. It's not right. Call me." I didn't call, but I did check Instagram, where I rarely ventured. Lily's latest post was a photo of her and Jason standing in front of the apartment, my apartment, with the caption, "Our future home. Fingers crossed." Just 2 weeks until the wedding, and we're still hoping my sister Emma will come around and give us the wedding gift she initially promised. It's hard when family doesn't support your dreams, especially when they have so much and you're just starting out. Wedding stress, family drama, bridezilla problems. The blatant lie that I had ever promised the apartment as a gift was bad enough. But it was the comments that truly stunned me. Friends and family weighing in with supportive messages. "She'll come around. How could she be so cruel?" Some people forget where they came from when they get successful. And then, most devastatingly, my mother's comment. "We're all praying Emma remembers what family means before it's too late. Some things are more important than money." I sat in my dark office, staring at the screen, a strange calm settling over me. This wasn't just about an apartment anymore. This was about a lifetime of patterns that I had allowed to continue because it was easier than fighting back, because I had told myself that being the bigger person meant being the doormat. I opened my contacts and called a lawyer, not the corporate firm I worked with, but a family friend who specialized in real estate law. "Mark, it's Emma Sullivan. I need your help with something. How soon can you draw up an eviction notice?" Lily's wedding day dawned clear and unseasonably warm for early autumn. I wasn't invited, of course. My RSVP card had been returned to me torn in half, a melodramatic touch that was pure Lily. I didn't mind. I had other plans for the day. While Lily was walking down the aisle at the country club our parents could barely afford, I was meeting with a locksmith at the suburban apartment. While she was saying "I do" to Jason, I was signing paperwork with the property management company I had hired to handle the apartment going forward. And while she was cutting her elaborate 5-tier cake, I was having the locks changed on a property that was legally and rightfully mine. I left a note taped to the door. "Congratulations on your wedding. As per my previous email, your tenancy has now converted to a month-to-month arrangement requiring market rate rent. The first payment of $2,800 is due immediately, along with a security deposit of $5,600. The signed lease agreement must be returned within 48 hours. Your personal belongings are secure inside. Contact the property management company at the number below to arrange access and payment terms. They are authorized to act on my behalf in all matters regarding this property. Emma. I included the management company's business card and a copy of the formal eviction notice that would be processed if they failed to comply with the terms. It was harsh. Some might even say cruel. But it was also the first time in my life I had set a boundary with my sister and actually enforced it. My phone rang at 11:42 p.m., Lily undoubtedly discovering my note upon returning from her reception. I let it go to voicemail. Then it rang again and again. Then came the texts, each more hysterical than the last. How could you do this on my wedding day? We can't even get our clothes for the honeymoon. Mom and Dad are furious. You've ruined everything. I turned off my phone and poured myself a glass of champagne. Tomorrow would bring more drama, more accusations, more attempts to make me the villain in their narrative. But tonight, I celebrated a small victory in the battle to reclaim my life and my self-respect. When I turned my phone back on the next morning, there were 37 missed calls and over 50 text messages from various family members. I scrolled through them without reading, then composed a single group text to my parents and Lily. I understand you're upset. However, this situation is now being handled legally through my property management company. Please direct all inquiries to them. I will not be discussing this matter further. Then I blocked their numbers. It was the nuclear option, cutting off all contact. It wasn't what I had wanted, but it was what they had forced with their escalating demands and manipulations. Sometimes the only way to stop a toxic cycle is to remove yourself from it entirely. The next few days were surreal. I went to work, attended meetings, made decisions affecting millions of dollars of company money, all while carrying the knowledge that I had effectively excised my entire immediate family from my life. There was grief, certainly. Loss. Moments of doubt where I wondered if I had overreacted. But there was also a strange, growing sense of liberation, as if I had put down a heavy burden I hadn't even realized I was carrying. My assistant buzzed my office on Wednesday afternoon. There's a Jason Miller here to see you. He doesn't have an appointment, but he's quite insistent. I sighed. Of course, Jason would be the one they sent. The new husband, the supposedly reasonable businessman who could talk sense into crazy, cold-hearted Emma. Send him in, I said, straightening my blazer and mentally preparing for battle. Jason entered, looking considerably less polished than usual. His normally perfectly coiffed hair was uncombed and dark circles shadowed his eyes. The honeymoon in Bali had clearly been postponed. Emma, he said, attempting his usual smooth charm despite his disheveled appearance. Thank you for seeing me. What can I do for you, Jason? I kept my tone professional, as if he were any other business associate. This situation has gotten out of hand, he said, taking a seat across from my desk without being invited. Lily is devastated. Your parents are beside themselves. Is this really the hill you want to die on? I'm not dying on any hill, I replied evenly. I'm simply exercising my rights as a property owner. On our wedding day? Do you have any idea what that did to Lily? She could barely enjoy the reception, knowing we'd come home to locked doors. I'm sorry for the timing, I said, surprising myself by actually meaning it. That was petty of me, but the decision stands. If you want to continue living in the apartment, you'll need to sign the lease and pay rent like any other tenant. He leaned forward, dropping the affable facade. We can't afford market rent, Emma. You know that. We're just starting out. You're both in your 30s with full-time jobs. Most couples manage. Not in this housing market, and not with wedding debts to pay off. Debts that could have been avoided with a more modest wedding, I pointed out. The average American wedding costs $20,000. Yours was over 6 figures. He had the grace to look uncomfortable. That's not fair. It was Lily's dream wedding. And my apartment is my investment property. We all make choices. Jason, now you need to make another one. Sign the lease and pay rent or find another place to live. Those are your options. His expression hardened. You know, Lily was right about you. You really are just a cold, calculating machine. No wonder you're alone. The familiar accusation stung less this time. Is that all, Jason? I have a meeting in 10 minutes. He stood, straightening his rumpled jacket. This isn't over. You may think you've won, but you've lost your family. Was it worth it? After he left, I sat at my desk, staring out at the cityscape beyond my window. Was it worth it? I didn't know yet. But for the first time in my adult life, I was making decisions based on what I needed, not on what would keep the peace or fulfill others' expectations of me. That had to be worth something. 2 months passed. Lily and Jason eventually signed the lease and paid the security deposit, though the monthly rent payments were consistently late. My property management company handled it, sending the appropriate notices and charging the appropriate fees. I remained blissfully removed from the process. My parents made several attempts to breach my defenses, showing up at my condo building where the doorman, well-tipped, turned them away, sending registered letters, which I returned unopened, and even trying to reach me through work colleagues who, to their credit, respected my privacy. Thanksgiving came and went. I declined an invitation from my assistant to join her family's celebration and instead spent the day volunteering at a homeless shelter, finding unexpected comfort in serving meals to strangers who asked nothing of me beyond a smile and an extra scoop of mashed potatoes. Christmas loomed, bringing with it memories of family traditions and a hollow ache beneath my ribs. I booked a solo trip to Quebec City, where I wandered snow-covered streets, drank mulled wine in cozy cafes, and sat in the silence of ancient churches, contemplating the year behind and the year ahead. It was in one of these churches, a magnificent cathedral with soaring ceilings and stained glass that transformed the winter sunlight into jewel-toned beams, that I finally allowed myself to cry for what I had lost. Not the apartment, never that, but the fantasy of family I had clung to. Despite all evidence that it had never really existed, I mourned the sister relationship I had always wanted, but never had. I grieved for parents who had never seen me clearly. I wept for the little girl who had tried so hard to be good, to be right, to be enough, only to discover that the goalposts would always move just beyond her reach. And when the tears were spent, I felt something new emerge, not bitterness or resentment, but a quiet determination to build a life that fulfilled me, whether or not it matched anyone else's definition of success or happiness. I returned to the city in January with a clarity I hadn't possessed before. I joined a book club. I took a pottery class. I accepted invitations to dinners and gallery openings that I would have previously declined in favor of working late. I started therapy, unpacking decades of family dynamics with a compassionate professional who helped me see patterns I had been blind to. And I met Ethan. He was the divorced father of a pottery classmate's child, dropping his daughter off at class and staying to watch rather than leaving. When I struggled with centering my clay on the wheel, he offered a tip that actually helped. When class ended, he asked if I wanted to get coffee. He was an architect who designed sustainable public housing, practical, thoughtful work that aligned with his values. He had a 10-year-old daughter he adored and co-parented respectfully with his ex-wife. He listened when I spoke and asked questions because he was genuinely interested, not because he was waiting for his turn to talk. On our third date, when I briefly mentioned the situation with my family, he didn't immediately take a side or offer platitudes. Instead, he said, "That sounds really painful. Sometimes the healthiest families are the ones we choose, not the ones we're born into." By spring, we were seeing each other regularly. I met his daughter Zoe, a serious, artistic child who showed me her sketchbook and asked thoughtful questions about finance that made me laugh with their precocious specificity. I introduced Ethan to my small circle of friends, who welcomed him with a warmth that told me they approved. Life developed a rhythm that felt both novel and natural. Weeknight dinners with Ethan when Zoe was with her mother. Weekend outings to museums or parks when she was with us. Quiet evenings alone in my condo that now felt peaceful rather than lonely. And then, in late April, the email arrived from the property management company. Lily and Jason had given notice. They were moving out of the apartment at the end of May. The news should have felt like victory. Instead, it left me oddly deflated. This final severance of the tangible connection between us made the estrangement feel more permanent, more real. That night, I told Ethan about the email as we cooked dinner together in my kitchen. "Are you okay?" he asked, setting down the knife he was using to chop vegetables. "I'm not sure," I admitted. "I thought I'd feel relieved." He leaned against the counter, giving me his full attention. "Maybe because it feels like closing a door?" "Maybe." I stirred the pasta sauce, avoiding his eyes. "Or maybe because I never wanted it to come to this in the first place. I just wanted them to respect my boundaries, to see me as a person, not a resource." "Have you thought about reaching out, now that the apartment issue is settled?" I had thought about it. In quiet moments, in the space between sleep and waking, in the middle of mundane tasks when my guard was down, I had imagined conversations, reconciliations, fresh starts, but then I would remember the years of patterns, the fundamental imbalance that had defined our relationships, and the moment would pass. I wouldn't know where to begin, I confessed. Too much has been said. Too many lines crossed. Ethan nodded, not pushing. It was one of the things I valued most about him, his respect for boundaries, his understanding that some wounds needed time. "Whatever you decide," he said, returning to his chopping. "I'm here. No pressure either way." When I fell asleep that night, his arm draped protectively across my waist, I dreamed of family dinners where everyone at the table was truly seen and valued, where love didn't come with conditions or calculations, where I didn't have to earn my place. I woke knowing what I needed to do. The suburban apartment was empty when I visited it the day after Lily and Jason moved out. The property manager had done a walkthrough and reported minimal damage, a few nail holes in the walls, a stain on the carpet in the guest bedroom, nothing that wouldn't be covered by the security deposit. Still, I wanted to see it myself. To close this chapter properly. The space echoed with my footsteps as I moved from room to room. Without Lily's eclectic decor and Jason's sports memorabilia, it reverted to what it had always been: an investment, a financial calculation, an asset on my balance sheet. In the kitchen, a forgotten wine opener sat in a drawer. In the bathroom, a single bobby pin remained on a shelf. Small traces of the life that had been lived here, now abandoned. I stood in the empty living room, remembering Lily's laughter during the handful of times I had visited them here. Despite our differences, there had been moments of genuine connection, brief windows where the sisters we could have been to each other shone through the dysfunction. My phone buzzed with a text from Ethan. "How's it going? Need company?" I replied. "Almost done. Meet you at Riverside Park in an hour?" "Perfect. Bringing coffee and that pastry you like." I smiled, tucking the phone away. Then I did something. Impulsive. Something the old Emma would never have done. I took out a piece of paper from my purse and wrote a note, leaving it on the kitchen counter where the new tenants, a young couple expecting their first child, would find it when they moved in next week. May this space hold joy, growth, and the kind of love that gives without keeping score. Emma. As I locked the door behind me for the last time, I felt a weight lift. Not completely, but enough to stand a little straighter, breathe a little deeper. I had one more stop to make before meeting Ethan. My parents' house looked smaller, Somehow, the once imposing colonial now just a house like any other on the tree-lined street. I sat in my car for several minutes, gathering courage before finally walking up the familiar path to the front door. My mother answered on the second ring, her eyes widening in shock when she saw me. She had aged in the months since I'd seen. Her last, new lines around her mouth, more gray in her hair. "Emma," she breathed, her hand flying to her throat. "What are you—" "I was hoping we could talk," I said quietly. "Just for a few minutes." She hesitated, then stepped back to let me in. "Your father's at his poker game. It's just me." That was probably for the best. Dad had always been the more volatile, less willing to bend. We sat in the living room, perched, awkwardly on opposite ends of the sofa like strangers. The silence stretched between us, years of unspoken hurts and expectations filling the space. "Lily and Jason moved out of the apartment," I finally said. Mom nodded. "They found a nice rental closer to Jason's new job. Did you know he's working? For a startup now? Something with blockchain." I didn't know. Another silence. "Emma, why are you here?" she asked finally, her voice tired. "I'm not sure," I admitted. "Maybe to see if there's anything left to salvage. Or maybe just to say that I'm sorry things turned out this way, even if I'm not sorry for the boundaries I set." Her lips thinned. "You hurt your sister very deeply. And she hurt me," I countered. "You all did. You made me feel like my success was something to be ashamed of, like my choices made me less worthy of respect, like my only value to this family was what I could provide financially." Mom looked away. "That wasn't our intention." "Intentions don't matter as much as impact, Mom. And the impact was that I felt used and unappreciated for years." She twisted. Her wedding ring, a nervous habit since childhood. "We're proud of you, Emma. We've always been proud. You have a funny way of showing it." She sighed, shoulders sagging. "Maybe we did take you for granted. You were always so capable, so self-sufficient. Lily needed more attention." "Everyone needs attention, Mom. Everyone needs to be seen and valued." For the first time, something like recognition flickered in her eyes. "I suppose you're right." She paused. "Your father and I have been doing some thinking since everything happened. We may have been unfair to you, expected too much." It wasn't quite an apology, but it was more acknowledgement than I had ever received. I decided to accept it as the olive branch it was intended to be. "I've been doing some thinking, too," I said, "about what kind of relationship we might be able to have moving forward. I don't think we can go back to the way things were. I won't let myself be used that way again." "What are you suggesting?" "Something new. Something with clear boundaries. And mutual respect. I don't know exactly what that looks like yet, but I'm willing to try if you are." She considered this, then nodded slowly. "I'd like that. And your father, well, he misses you, even if he's too stubborn to say it." We talked for another hour, careful and measured, neither of us wanting to reopen wounds that had barely begun. To heal. We didn't solve anything, not really, but we created an opening, a possibility. As I was leaving, Mom asked, "Are you seeing anyone?" The question was so normal, so maternal, that it made me smile despite everything. "Yes, actually. His name is Ethan. He's an architect. He has a daughter named Zoe. You'll have to tell me about him sometime," she said, and I could hear the genuine interest beneath the polite words. "I will," I promised. And I meant it. Ethan was waiting for me at the park, sitting on a bench overlooking the river, a coffee carrier and pastry bag beside him. Zoe was with him, flying a kite in the open field nearby, her dark braids bouncing as she ran. "Hey," he said, his face lighting up when he saw me. "How did it go?" I sat beside him, taking the coffee he offered. "Better than expected, harder than I hoped." "That tracks with most family reconciliations," he said wryly. "Baby steps?" "Microscopic steps," I agreed, "but steps nonetheless. We watched Zoe for a while, her determination to keep the kite aloft, despite the fitful breeze making me smile. She reminded me a bit of myself at that age. Focused, persistent, unwilling to let failure be an option. "I've been thinking," Ethan said after a comfortable silence. "Dangerous," I teased. He laughed. "My lease is up in July." "Oh?" I took a sip of my coffee, my heart suddenly beating faster. "Yeah, and Zoe's been talking about how much she likes your place, the big windows. The doorman who gives her high fives. Ahmed is a treasure," I agreed. "So I was wondering." He turned to face me fully. "What would you think about us moving in together? Not as a freeloader," he added quickly. "I'd contribute fairly to the mortgage and expenses. We'd draw up an agreement that protects us both. Whatever makes you comfortable." The old Emma would have hesitated, would have created a spreadsheet analyzing the financial and emotional pros and cons, would have worried about what might happen if things didn't work out, but I wasn't that Emma anymore. "I think," I said slowly, "that I'd like that very much." His face broke into a smile that made my chest ache in the best possible way. He leaned in to kiss me, a gentle promise of the life we might build together. "Gross, Dad," Zoe called from the field, her kite momentarily forgotten as she observed our display of affection with theatrical disgust. We both laughed, breaking apart but staying close, shoulders touching. "Does this mean we're going to be like a family?" Zoe asked, abandoning her kite to join us on the bench. Ethan looked at me, letting me answer. "I think," I said carefully, "that we already are a family, just a new kind of family that we're building together." She considered this with the serious contemplation of a child who has already experienced one family reconfiguration. "I like that," she decided finally. "Building something new." Over her head, Ethan's eyes met mine, warm with understanding, and something deeper that neither of us was quite ready to name. I had spent so many years defining myself by what I had accumulated, the career, the properties, the financial security. I had allowed my family to define me by what I could provide rather than who I was. I had accepted the narrative that my success made me somehow less human, less deserving of unconditional love. But sitting here, with Ethan's hand in mine and Zoe's chatter filling the air between us, I understood that the most valuable things couldn't be calculated on a balance sheet or measured in square footage. The journey back to my family, if there even was a journey back, would be long and uncertain. The wounds were deep, the patterns entrenched. There might never be the perfect reconciliation scene from a Hallmark movie, the tearful apologies, and instant healing. But I had learned something crucial through all of this. Family wasn't just about blood and history, it was about choice, about seeing and being seen, about boundaries that protected without isolating. And for the first time in my life, I was choosing a family that chose me back, exactly as I was.